SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.
Come see your locally owned and operated Linton Glass for all your glass needs. No matter what glass you need to replace, you can count on Linton Glass. Call us today at 601-835-4336 or find us on the web at lintonglass.com.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Friday, y'all.
A nasty one out there. Don't like it. Rain, cold. But what about our friends in the northern tier of the state? I'm hearing reports that there's snow on the ground up there.
Yeah, it depends on where you are in North Mississippi, but I've seen reports anywhere from just a few inches of snow with a little light icing on the bottom of it on the roads to up to, I think I saw 6.5 inches in Oxford.
Wow. Well, my son...
And that was earlier. If it's still going, that's just accumulating.
Yeah, man. He's up at... So, and that was what was predicted, right? If you saw the bands, the colored bands, it was kind of draped across the top third of the state, and then below that, just rain and cold.
I feel like we might need to start giving the meteorologist a little more benefit of the doubt.
I would agree.
Because the rule of thumb for a meteorologist predicting snow in the Magnolia State, if they say we're getting 6 inches, you go, all right. Yeah, right. We might get some flurries. You always say this. We never get 6 inches, but they seem to have gotten it right the last handful of times.
Yeah, it seems. I would agree. I know they get criticized quite a bit, but it is the weather. It's nature. But we also have incredibly sophisticated, powerful technology at their disposal. Of course, you got to know what you're doing to interpret all that data and make forecasts. I actually think they do great, honestly. And they got this right. How could you deny that they didn't? That they did, I should say. They got it right. I totally believe that. My son is in Arkansas hunting, and he just sent some photos to my wife and I. And he traveled last night. And, of course, no problems getting up there, but he just sent photos. It is a winter wonderland, I'm telling you. A whole bunch of snow on the ground. It's beautiful.
Should be a good hunt then.
Yeah. And he just sent me a photo of him and all of his camo and so forth. Looks like they're headed out. Yeah, man.
When it gets real cold, they got to move to stay warm. And
exactly.
That snow kind of takes away their natural camouflage.
Exactly. It looks like he's got that's him. Sorry. Looks like he's got a touch. It was a video. His what do you call his whistle on? Isn't that what you call it? Duck whistle. I don't know. What do you call that?
Is he duck hunting?
It looks like he might be going duck hunting. I think they're doing both, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not honestly
duck
sure.
Call, yeah.
The duck call, pardon me. I said duck whistle. Oh, gosh.
I just presumed deer hunting.
Yeah, and I think they're doing both.
Okay.
Is my understanding. This property, a friend of his has up in Arkansas.
I don't know that I would go duck hunting in the snow, but deer hunting I would go in the snow.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. Mr. Trump, the president-elect, he was sentenced this morning. He petitioned the court to delay the sentencing, but it happened this morning, and the results, just nothing. That's the best way. It's a nada, nothing burger. Unconditional discharge of the sentence. This is a fairly rare action, very lenient alternative to jail or probation. Justice Merchan acknowledged, of course, that the president-elect's inauguration is just 10 days out. And he said Donald Trump, the ordinary citizen, Donald Trump, the criminal defendant, would not be entitled to the protections of the presidency, explaining that only the office shielded the defendant from the verdict's gravity. But the court has determined that the only lawful sentence that permits entry of judgment of conviction without encroaching on the highest office of the land is an unconditional discharge. So, this is what the justice said. That's his direct quote there. So it sounds to me like he did take into account the fact that Donald Trump is the president-elect in his sentencing, essentially. He then wished the president-elect, Donald Trump, Godspeed, departed the bench. That was it. Done deal. So, good news is for the country, in my view, is that this is in the rearview mirror now. All this legal stuff associated with the president-elect. It was this kind of baggage and a bit of an albatross hanging over his neck. What in the heck are the race lady and the MSNBC folks? What are they going to talk about, Rhino? They don't have this anymore. This is over. So that's the big news of the morning. The other big news that is popping this morning is the economy. The economy. So the jobs report came out, and it was stronger considerably than expected. Non-farm payroll data shows the economy added 256,000 jobs in December. That is 100,000 in excess of expectation. The unemployment rate ticked down, edged lower to 4.1%. It was thought it was going to hold steady at 4.2. So it came down. And what does all this mean to the average individual? One big thing is that markets consume this and analyze this as indicating inflation is not under control, that the Fed's actions were ill-advised, wrongfully timed, totally bungled, in spite of the fact that they raised interest rates 11 times and have then pulled them back, I think twice, right? Since then, bottom line is we still expect inflation to be sticky and stubborn, and the big indicator of that is the 10-year Treasury. It is up to 4.75%. Right now, 4.785%. So what does that mean? It means mortgage rates are going to go up. The cost of financing long-term debt, such as for a vehicle, other major purchases, going to go up. Credit card rates going to go up. And investors say, we're just not convinced we got this inflation thing under control, and that's causing big old problems. So for the markets, massive sell-off. The Dow down 630 points at this minute. The NASDAQ also taking it on the chin, down more than 2%, over 390 points. Big old sell-off. The president-elect is going to be inheriting a mess, not so much from the robustness of the economy, because the reality is the economy's strong. It's strong in the fact that people are working. So normally I think to the average household, when they kind of take an assessment of the strength or lack thereof of the economy from a personal household perspective, it's, hey, do I have a job? And B, can I afford stuff? And the former is pretty good. People are working. Job market still pretty strong, obviously, given the number of jobs created that just blew past expectations. On the inflation front, people are still struggling with that. And to a great extent, that's because everybody's working and they've got disposable income, so demand is strong. And I've said this many times before, and it's a tough pill to swallow. And I kind of refer back to Ronald Reagan when he took over from the late Jimmy Carter. Who could forget that mess that was inherited? And Mr. Reagan made it clear, we got to take some strong medicine here, and he set off to promote and implement extremely strong monetary policy, specifically interest rates raised dramatically with the intention of reducing demand. And that worked. We got inflation down, but for that short period of time, couple of years, good grief, the interest rates were difficult to deal with. 16% mortgage rates, as I recall, in 1981, 1982 time frame. It was nuts. So that's what's going on. The other thing is crude oil prices jumped 5%. That's because of icy weather in the domestic oil patch, more sanctions overseas. Expect the price of gas to increase here pretty soon as a result. I think it's about $77 a barrel. So, hate to be the bearer of all this rather dour economic news, but this is what we're dealing with. We got to get new policy in place to address it. Can't come soon enough. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio, Maurice Sanderson at 10:35, and then it's Caleb Sailors at 11:20.
Of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Check it out. Let's do this.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. Man, Jillian Michaels last night, I caught an interview with her. She absolutely is ripping California leadership, namely the governor, the mayor, completely incompetent. Jillian Michaels, of course, she helped me out here, Rhino, known for being like a fitness guru, right? She's somewhat conservative, I would say, moderate, center, right? Openly gay. In fact, in the interview, talks about her wife and properties she owns there in the Pacific Palisades area that have been destroyed by the fires. But, man, she takes the mayor and the governor, Gavin Newsom, Mayor Karen Bass, to task.
She referred to Donald Trump as, quote, a bigot trying to rob Americans of their equal rights.
There you go.
During the 2016 United States presidential election. And a reversal, though, she said she has voted for Trump in the 2024 United States presidential election.
I think it's another example where just a clear-thinking person says, enough! And you're seeing...
Or they finally admit to themselves they've been lied to by the media.
Correct. Good point. But I think nothing hits home more than your homes being destroyed, literally, right, because of the incompetence of the California government. But let's keep this in mind. Remember the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill passed in 2021? Unfortunately, a number of Republicans in the Senate joined with Democrats to pass that legislation, including Mississippi's own Roger Wicker. I criticized that vote. I don't have a problem saying that, and I denounced this legislation. Can anybody find any examples of where it's helped anywhere? I ask you. Well, think about this. It included billions of dollars for wildfire prevention. The money was supposed to be spent over 5 years. We're in year 4 of 5. Yet California is asking for people to help put the fires out and doesn't have any water and did nothing to manage the forests, no controlled burns, no burning or removal of the underbrush, which is just kindling. They live in a dang tinderbox. It's not unusual that the winds blow out there. The weather systems converge that causes these very strong gradients. Now, admittedly, 90-mile-an-hour winds is an aberration, no doubt. But 50-miles-an-hour winds are very common and can easily spread these wildfires. They contribute to and exacerbate the task of putting them out, containing them. But this is just another example of complete government incompetence. And it's frustrating. It's maddening. But I will say that you're seeing a lot of, I guess, self-professed liberals who are all in on let's spend California's money on housing for the homeless and feeding and providing health care and other benefits to illegals. Let's welcome them all in and have 14,000 Pride Days and all that kind of crap, and DEI conferences and training sessions and all that junk. And meanwhile, you try to plug up a hose to a fire hydrant and you get nothing but air. You showed me some videos yesterday that astonished me. Would you explain that, what firefighters were using to douse these fires?
Yeah, they had cut the power to the generators or cut the power to the pumps that would pump water through the hydrants. And they could not replenish the water in their tanker truck. So they used all the pressure in their tanker truck. And then when that pressure was done, there's still a little bit of residual water in the tanker truck. And they were so desperate for water to put out fires, they were literally using their hats. They were using leather purses they found in abandoned vehicles, whatever they could find to just carry a gulp of water over to a fire to toss it on it and then come back and repeat the process over and over again.
It blew me away that in 2025, with all the technology, the sophistication, I mean, it's not like fighting fires is something new. Hey, we just figured out that if we put these big water reservoirs on these trucks that can travel to the fire site and have these big foldable hoses and lots of pressure from the power source of the vehicle, that's pretty good at putting fires out. Yet they're running around. It looked like one of them had one of the soft type water coolers, right? He was like his lunch in it or something. He was filling up. You mentioned the hat, the helmet. He was filling that up with water and then going just throwing that on this massive fire. You're kidding me. It's just unbelievable that happens in this country in this day and age. But it's another example where political correctness literally does kill, literally kills. And Gavin Newsom's running around. He doesn't have a clue. Karen Bass is refusing to answer questions when confronted about, do you think it's okay that you're in Ghana while your city's ablaze?
It's not even that. It's these people, these Democrat politicians, these loony liberals have lived so much of their adult life uncontested because they said all the right things. They looked the right way. That they didn't even know on the flight back from Ghana. It's not like it's a short flight. She didn't even have the knowledge, the wisdom to at least craft a boilerplate answer to give, to talk around in circles. No, she just froze up. And that's the leadership that Democrats vote for. Year in, year out, across the country, because they all have the minds of children.
Ridiculous. Totally agree. Totally ridiculous. I do think, and I hope and I pray, that this is opening the eyes of people. That the prioritization of so much stuff that really does not advance society, and more importantly, doesn't fulfill the core mission of government, which is protection, security, and that includes against fire. That's what you pay all that tax money for. And in this case, even the federal government appropriated billions to wildfire prevention. Yet we're experiencing the worst, arguably in terms of cost, in our history. Upwards over $100 billion. And now you're seeing everybody in Los Angeles say, well, the state's broke, the city's broke, we're going to have to rely on the federal government again. And now there's talk in Washington, you've probably seen this. You know how we rushed through a continuing resolution in December to keep the government funded through March. Now they're talking about extending that, another CR, and we're going to incorporate a bunch of money in it to help out California. Now, I'm not saying that that's inappropriate, but it's preventable. This is using taxpayer money that it could have
it's not like
been
the
required.
Flooding that wiped away entire homesteads and communities in western North Carolina.
Right.
Where
So
that
true.
happens once every century. You can plan for it, but it's just kind of silly to do so.
Right.
Versus you literally live in Southern California where there are wildfires every freaking year.
So true. Yeah.
Speaking of Western North Carolina, they're getting kicked out of their hotels tomorrow into the snow.
I didn't know that.
Because FEMA says, well, you're out. You're done.
Man.
Biden announced he's going
to
to pay 100% of California's needs for the next 180 days.
Oh, man. I do.
On his way out the door.
I do question that. I really do. So that is.
Oh, and he also shut down airspace over L.A., so they couldn't fly any of the firefighting planes over L.A. to put out any of the fires because he had to be there for his photo op with Gavin Newsom.
Incredible. Just more examples of total incompetence. Then, of course, a huge problem for insurance, the insurance industry. You know that. Many of these homeowners who lost everything had their insurance canceled. You got insurance companies that said, yeah, it's just too risky. Too risky because of government inaction and incompetence.
Yeah, because in California, if you're an insurance company trying to raise the rates because of increased risk, you got to get that approved, and it's never going to get approved.
But now, because of law, as I understand it, you were talking about this yesterday, the outsized losses against assets for a particular
Florida. California's got like $200 million in the bank to cover these fire damages.
Yeah.
And what are the estimates now into?
$100 billion.
Okay, yeah. We'll detail how that law is going to hurt every single insurance payer in California later.
Coming right back with Maurice Sanderson. Stay with us.
Middays with Gerard Gibert
Welcome to our shop.
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Okay, now you have a good one.
I'm as free as a bird now. And this bird will never change. Oh, and the bird you cannot change. And this bird you cannot change.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. We're live in the Element Wealth studio. Thanks so much for joining us on this rather chilly and wet, and in some areas of the state, snowy Friday, right? We're pleased to welcome now Maurice Sanderson, former policy director with the Republican Governors Association, and, of course, a GOP strategist. Hey, Marie, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So we're getting ever so close, inching towards Inauguration Day, the swearing in of the 47th President, Donald Trump. He is wasting no time building coalitions and inviting lawmakers to his resort there at Mar-a-Lago and discussing with them his agenda. I don't know that I've ever seen a president-elect so active and honestly overshadowing the existing president. What do you think?
He's very organized. He's strategic. To quote a Democrat official yesterday, I was aware of the quote Trump effect, but had no idea, end quote. The president has a lot of momentum right now, and to his credit and his team's credit, the president-elect, that is, he's wasting no time. He's on Capitol Hill working with Republicans, talking through possibilities, indicate them, just get the job done. You'll have my backup, addressing problems, and we're going to have a great first 100 days with President Trump as our new president.
Yeah, it sure seems like it, and I think it's wise of him to really get these folks off site. Of course, he's had meetings with them, as you know, in Washington. He's been there over the last week as well, but I mean, he's being proactive. He's calling them. Let's get together. Let's talk about the agenda. Let's hear your concerns and let me convey to you my vision. And then I need your help. I can't do this by myself. You know what I can through executive orders. The last I heard, he's got 100 ready to go. Most of that, I think, will just be reversing orders issued by the current president. But this seems like the wise thing to do, and not necessarily go out into the internet universe and make points, which he does, and a lot of that I think is just to kind of to pressure people he needs to get on his train and to just muster public support. This is the way you conduct business, and he's a business person.
Absolutely. I've said on your show before, he and his team are extremely organized. They have been working on this for months. They will be ready to undo what they can through the powers that the president has on day one, and it will be organized and politically savvy. And then the rest of the agenda, he's doing what he needs to do to work with the Congress to get it done. So the American people gave him a new order to go and reverse a lot of things they didn't like in the last 4 years. And the president is taking his call to action very seriously. Promises made, promises kept. And you're going to see that in particular in the first 100 days in year one in a very real way.
There's no doubt about that. And I wonder, you've seen this, I'm sure, the passing of the Laken-Riley Act, which garnered significant Democrat support in the Senate. Not so much in the House, but in the Senate. Do you think maybe they're seeing the light that, this is sensible legislation? And yeah, this may conflict with this honestly radical Democrat agenda, but this is common sense. And that's what the president-elect says all the time, just common sense policy. I just wonder if that's the Trump effect at play here.
It is. You look at the groups that President Trump won, you can see where the American public is on these issues. Good politics makes good policy. And I think the Democrats are seeing that a lot of these issues are good for them to move as well. It's good for the country. And so as an American, I'm glad to see both the Democrats and the Republicans working together on such an important issue like immigration. This is only a first step, but I'm pleased with our Mississippi senators and the rest of the Congress for doing what they need to do to get this done.
How important is it, Marie, the judge's ruling, Judge Marchand's ruling, that hopefully just puts all these this legal baggage, if you will, to bed so we can focus on getting the work done for the American people?
Look, it's politics. It's time to move on. And the president has said that. I think this is just another clown show. We'll see that today, and we'll move on and we'll get business done. I really think that we're moving into a huge week. This inauguration and the festivities surrounding the inauguration are off the charts. There's something for everyone, and the crowds are going to be insane. And I think that momentum that you will see and feel on the ground will propel the president into his legislative administrative agenda.
Yeah, totally agree. Now, we got through the speaker ordeal with a whole lot of fanfare. I think that's also pretty important that we can put that behind us. We know where everybody stands and start working on the agenda.
As a Republican, I'm glad that speaker's race didn't go on longer than it needed to. It was a long vote, but only one vote. I think, look, a lot of these elected officials have things they need for their districts, and I don't fault them for that, but I'm glad everybody got in line behind Speaker Johnson and the president. The president threw his support behind Speaker Johnson, and it was a good thing for the party to have that vote and move on. Now let's go do our business.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think we're in good shape there. So what about the legislative agenda? So the president-elect has indicated he'd like to see one big, beautiful bill to include policies that address immigration, energy, and, of course, the Trump tax cuts, tax policy, top of the heap as well. But he said, if we need to break it into two to just accommodate the needs and get it done, I'm all about results. I think that's the right message. Where do you think we're headed there?
I think Congress has to do what they need to do to get this done. And the president does not want to get in the weeds. I think he'll support Senator Thune and Speaker Johnson with the path they see best. Traditionally, having worked on Capitol Hill, the more you put in a bill to get more votes, sometimes the easier it is to pass. I think if you're Speaker Johnson, you're worried about having the votes to do that, right? And so you want to accomplish the goal without having to put too much in the bill. But, border security, immigration, trade policy, and to your point, taxes are absolutely things that the president has said he wants to get done, and he will get done. The taxes expire, so that is one of those events that is a must pass. So they're going to need the best path to do that. I think everyone here is well-intentioned, and I think the president's just saying, figure out how to get it done and get it done. Don't disappoint me. Yeah, I think you're right. And one of the things that has been included in the tax discussion, as you know, is perhaps lifting altogether or increasing the threshold of the state and local tax, the so-called SALT cap, which would benefit mainly the deep blue states that have extremely high state and local taxes. But that could muck up the reconciliation process, Marie. What do you think about that? It could. There are a lot of taxes that will be fought as well as pushed for, rather. Yeah. I mean, you've got the corporate income tax, the personal income tax, SALT, as you noted, which is a Republican First Democrat thing. You have healthcare taxes that are going to be needed to be re-upped, R&D tax credits. You're a tax guy, you know this better than I do, but there are so many things that are going to be on the table, and it costs money to do that. But it's also good for the American economy. So it will be a debate. Speaker Johnson has had lieutenants working on this for months. They have been doing roundtables across the country. So the Republicans are not walking into this with their eyes closed. They've been talking to constituents and talking to policymakers and figuring out a way to do this. What it costs, fiscal note scores. These are words that those of you who work in the legislature know. What does this cost? How do we offset it? All these conversations have been happening, and they will continue, obviously, with momentum as we move into January and February and March. You know, who's really good at this, and I think we're fortunate, is Representative Congressman Jason Smith, that heads Ways and Means in the House. He's a wonk when it comes to this stuff. He's really good, don't you think? Very good. I've been in meetings with him. He's smart, has a really strong staff, understands the policy, understands what it costs, wants to get this done for the president. You may have read reports that he's pushed a two-bill process. I think he'll be at the table with the speaker working to try and get this done. As I said a minute ago, everyone's well-intentioned. They want to get this done. So how do you build a broad coalition to pass what the American people want? And ultimately, and more importantly, what President Trump wants. Yeah, totally agree. And again, the message was delivered loud and clear on November 5th. And we're relying on the Republican-controlled House and Senate to get that done, get it to the president's desk, and start doing good stuff for the American people. Marie, always good to talk to you. Really appreciate you coming on. Enjoy your insight. You have a great weekend, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks. Great. Thank you. Take care. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
The new year 3.
Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk Mississippi.
Well, we're grateful to Maurice Sanderson, former policy director, Republican Governors Association, also a GOP strategist, for joining us here on Middays. She's got lots of insight, knows a lot of these people, works with them in her line of work, and so we appreciate her joining us to share some of those insights, as we said. So,
before we got her on the air, we were talking about how if you pay insurance in California, you're going to be paying through the nose because of, well, Democrat leadership in California.
Right.
California has what they call the California FAIR Plan. It's a publicly available fire insurance plan for your property. Well, FAIR has about $200 million in the bank. That's what they've got left to help anybody that might be covered. And we just discussed how they're into the billions in damages. Well, California law dictates if FAIR runs out of money, then any of the deficit has to be made up by all insurance payees.
Right. So basically, they just take all the losses and divide them up among everybody else, even if you didn't incur a loss.
And some of the estimates on the increased premiums for those with insurance in California, when the estimated damages were around $25 billion, they were already saying you could see premiums rise 100 to 150% to cover the difference.
Yep.
So I wonder how many insurance companies are just going to go, you know what? I'm out. I'm not doing business in California anymore.
Right.
Which means there's even fewer people to pay the same amount, which means they're going to have to pay even more. And it's just going to snowball until nobody can afford insurance in California.
Right. Yeah, it's a sad situation. There's no doubt about it. Well, yesterday we got into a fairly lengthy discussion, analysis of the school choice issue here in the state of Mississippi. And we sort of started out by reading a one-page flyer produced by the Madison County School Districts, where the district is essentially published three things that they support legislatively, they'd like to get done, they're prioritizing, and then three which they oppose. And, of course, one of those things they very strenuously oppose is any idea of school choice, education freedom, open enrollment, which is one aspect of school choice. That simply means a student would have the right to request and receive approval for a transfer from one school to another. And that gets into lots of details and nuance, just depending on how any legislation would be drafted that could pass. And then another aspect, really there's multiple aspects of education choice, but another would be the ability of a household to tap the state funds appropriated, allocated to a student in their household, and have those funds follow that student to the education setting of choice, such as a private school. So the $6,600 and change a year that the state allocates for every public school student, the base amount, there's some adjustments to that given the education funding formula that was enacted last year. That changed the way that works. replacing the old, outdated MAEP formula. But an example would be that money could be used to pay for tuition in a private school. That would be a public to private is how it's typically referred to. And Madison County Schools opposes both of those policy positions. And then, of course, they support a teacher pay raise, and they want the student funding formula, which passed in 2024, to be revised. They think it needs some adjustment. And then they want an increased emphasis on career technical education. I think that's fairly consistently supported across the board there. With respect to the school choice issues, though, the open enrollment and the education savings accounts that could be used to pay for private school tuition or even homeschool, we got into that quite a bit. And that gets complicated, unfortunately, because there's a state component and there's a local component to every student's education. And so the question is, well, when you cross over districts, who's responsible for the local component in the new district, the target district school? And typically the way that's been implemented in the country, it's the student, it's the household. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio after Fox News and SuperTalk News.
Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. We thank you so much for joining us on this
Friday, y'all.
So on the C Spire text line, we have someone who is upset that I failed to state the last name of our guest, Marie Sanderson. I did, of course, when we started the interview, and at the conclusion of the interview, I simply referred to her as Marie and didn't point out and state her last name. So I apologize if that was a problem for anyone. You sometimes, I guess, when you're here in the studio and we're having these interviews, and they're also on the television as well. So if you were to stream our broadcast, which you can do on your mobile device, your full-size computer from anywhere in the world, as a matter of fact, by logging on to the SuperTalk app, it's really cool. And you not only can listen to us over the air, and I know a lot of people do when they're driving and in their cars and so forth, and we're very grateful for that. Just wanted to let you know that you can stream our broadcast. And when you do so, you'll see a split screen with me and our subject, our interview subject. And, of course, Rhino does a great job of placing their names and I guess their titles or any other associated information. In this case with Marie, I think you had GOP strategist next to her name. Just wanted to let you know that. And so, sometimes I forget that because I'm looking at the screen and figuring everybody else is. And I know you're not, and you're often in your vehicle. So apologize for any inconvenience that may have caused. So we got Caleb Sailors, by the way. He's coming in the next segment. He is on the staff here in the SuperTalk News Department. We look forward to that conversation. Just before we went to break, we were talking about this school choice issue, which is going to be a high-profile, hotly contested issue. You recall last year, legislation did meander its way through the House and then didn't go very far in the Senate. The goal among school choice proponents, I'd be one of those, is ultimately to implement universal school choice. And that covers all the bases. That essentially means everybody in the state, every student, and of course students are minors and they have parents, caretakers, that every student would be eligible to access the state funding appropriated to them and direct that money to the school setting of their choice, be that transferring from one public school to another or enrolling in a private school, homeschool, micro school, charter school. Even if you presently have students in a private school, you would have access to the money allocated to your student for their public education, public school education. Again, to be used to cover the cost of private school tuition. Universal school choice has been implemented. Let's think through this, Rhino. Arkansas, probably the situation we talk about the most because it's right next door to us. But you remember Iowa. What's the governor's name up there? Kay something or another comes to me. She's great. She's brilliant. Also, when she got elected...
Kim Reynolds?
Kim, that's it. Yeah, I knew it was a K. Kim Reynolds. She's awesome. If you haven't seen her or had an opportunity to experience her interviews, she's just brilliant. She's good. But you remember that was one of her priorities. She got that passed. Also, tax cuts. She's just a great conservative leader of the state of Iowa. Was it not Iowa where the bent-out-of-shape liberal journalist published some poll in advance of the election that had, like, Kamala Harris up 10 points or something insane like that?
Oh, yeah.
Remember that? Delusional and, honestly, being disingenuous. That's a fancy word for saying you're lying, and you know you're lying. It's one thing to lie. It's another thing when you know you're lying. And she did, and that's disgusting. But Kim Reynolds, so Iowa was a state, Arizona, Florida, Arkansas, and then Alabama, right? Implemented not so long ago. I think they passed legislation to enact and phase in universal school choice. Louisiana as well. New Orleans has been kind of a model for success of charter schools, the city of New Orleans, for some time. So we're kind of getting boxed in from the other states. Tennessee is looking at this strong as well. Texas, unable to get it passed. You remember Governor Abbott, though, a big proponent of universal school choice, after he couldn't get some Republicans to support legislation which caused it not to pass, I believe he went out and saw to it that those Republican reps and senators would get primaried so he could make some changes there in the Texas legislature to get that part of his agenda passed. I thought it was pretty good. But all I'm saying is that Mississippi still is kind of white space when you look at the map of conservative states that has not been able to get full school choice, universal school choice implemented. We do have some minor, limited school choice options. Those have been around for a while. Charter schools, you'd have to put in that category, although we're lagging way behind where we thought we'd be. I think we have 10 schools now, and a couple of those may be in development. But
our school choice options tend to line up more with the few typically Democrat-controlled states that have allowed some school choice, like Maryland and New Jersey.
Right. And
where it's in limited use for limited use in certain use cases, but it's nowhere near universal school choice.
Right. And like New York, for example, has a robust charter school system. But you remember Doped de Blasio, when he got in there, he wanted to shut them all down. There are like a number of them around the Long Island community in particular, which there's a bunch of people in Long Island. They're just compressed onto an island. But they have a robust charter school community, and he wanted to shut them all down, which is not unusual for a liberal wacko leftist like him that just thinks the government's got to control everything, including the education of your children. And they've got to dictate to you and tell you, if you live at this address, you've got to go to this school. School choice is about freedom. It's about education freedom, choice. It's amazing to me that all we heard out of Barack Obama when he was promoting his health care plan is, we want you to have choice. which we don't. That didn't happen. You talk about that all the time. We didn't really produce the results that were projected and we were sold. But why are they opposed to choice when it comes to educating kids? They're all about this choice and competition. Remember that over and over he said that. Of course, Bernie Sanders says we have too much choice. I can't believe it. I go to the grocery store, look at all the different dishwashing soap brands or whatever he said, deodorant, I think it was.
Bernie Sanders has been worthless the majority of his adult life.
Remember that? He said, I'm just appalled at all these deodorant choices. So, yeah, Alabama did pass school choice. Now, I don't think it's universal in Alabama. I know Arkansas is. Georgia, all this happened in 24. Alabama passed school choice. Georgia passed school choice. Idaho passed school choice. Indiana, school choice. Iowa, universal school choice. Nebraska, North Carolina, universal school choice. Ohio, universal. Oklahoma, universal. Utah, universal. So we're just having a hard time getting just the basic lowest level first tier of school choice passed in Mississippi, and that's just open enrollment, which means you are not required to attend the school that is assigned to where you live based on your address. Open enrollment says if I would like to transfer to a different public school, you could attempt to do that now, but the school to which you were assigned, the homeschool, has to agree to it. And they don't. It's the bottom line is they always veto that, if you will, and reject that request. And of course the target school would have to agree to it as well. But that could be structured to allow, legislation could, to allow the target school to administer an admissions process so that they're not overwhelmed. They wouldn't have to accept everybody that applies. Within reason, they could reject those applications if capacity is a problem. We don't want to overwhelm the schools with a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of students that they couldn't accommodate. That would produce negative education outcomes. And there could be some other criteria as well to just be reasonable in that respect. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, it's Caleb Saylors, multimedia journalist, SuperTalk Mississippi News.
Doing a little thing called the hillbilly rock.
You already.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We're pleased to welcome now Caleb Saylors, multimedia journalist, SuperTalk Mississippi News.
I'm the maestro. I'm conducting this, Chiron.
All right. What in the heck's going on here, Caleb, in the great state of Mississippi?
We've got a lot of things going on. I will give a breaking news update right now in the sports world. Ole Miss wide receiver, I will say former Ole Miss wide receiver, Aiden Williams. He entered the transfer portal recently. He is not going very far, just going a few miles to the east, going to Mississippi State. And he will be part of Jeff Levy's offense this season. Williams, he was at Ole Miss for 2 seasons, had just under 120 yards receiving, didn't have any touchdowns, and kind of one of those pieces that was every year, his first year is like, all right, well, his sophomore year, we're gonna see a jump, but he was behind a very talented group of wide receivers at Ole Miss, and it looks like Ole Miss has added more talent through the transfer portal and has guys coming back next year, and so kind of unclear how much of the field he would see this coming season. So he's found a a new home in Starkville, and he will definitely be utilized in Jeff Lebby's offense. And I know the guys on Sports Talk will have more break that down this afternoon.
Interesting. So it's just stirring the old pot. This NIL stuff, isn't it?
Getting the Egg Bowl rivalry, getting Egg Bowl talks heated up. And look, the Egg Bowl just happened. We just finished the Egg Bowl just a little over a month ago, but it's not a bad thing to get the rivalry stirred up, get the conversation stirred up. Of course, Mississippi State fans are celebrating this as a huge win, as like saying they dunked on Ole Miss on this, and Ole Miss people are kind of blowing it off, saying, not that big of a deal. We'll be okay regardless. We'll see. We'll see how Williams does on the field this year.
Interesting.
And so, Gerard, transitioning here, we've had some pretty rough weather in the state of Mississippi, last night, going into today, and going into this weekend. And North Mississippi was hit pretty hard. I've got some buddies in DeSoto County and northern areas of Mississippi that have had some snow and sent pictures of it. And the MDOT is saying right now, if you're in that region of the state, be careful. I mean, if you don't have to be on the road, you don't have a medical emergency, you don't have a job to be at, don't get on the roads. Stay home. Avoid. Because, the roads can ice over. We might face black ice at this point if the roads freeze over again tonight. And just avoid any kind of danger there. Here in central and southern Mississippi, not as bad. We've got some rain. Of course, obviously, proceed with caution there. But I would recommend for people to go check out MDOT and MEMA on social media to stay updated. And, of course, we'll keep you updated, too. SuperTalk.fm, in our social media, we'll keep you updated on everything going on in Mississippi, too. A side note there, though, Gerard, we do have 2 basketball games taking place tomorrow night, and I'm not going to break the games down. The guys on Sports Talk could do that, but one in Oxford and one in Starkville. They both have pretty bad weather. Oxford worse than Starkville right now. Be careful. If you're planning on going to the ball game, be careful. That's my word of advice right there. And speaking of the weather, right now our lawmakers are not in session today because of the weather. We had our legislative session kicked off earlier this week, and the lawmakers gavelled in. They haven't done a whole lot this week. I'm sure next week will be much busier than this week was, but they kind of coerced effort saying, probably not a good time to be at the Capitol today because we do have a lot of lawmakers from North Mississippi and areas that have been impacted. So hopefully they've all made it home safely and can come back next week.
Send them all home.
Get things started. Right.
Means they can't make no laws.
Well, they're going to try to starting next week. And Gerard, by our first deadline, we're looking at possibly 4,000, maybe more bills that get introduced this year.
Okay.
But some of the hotter topics, of course, some of these bills may be about pecan theft or blueberries, something that are more menial. But we can probably expect to see a tax bill as early as next week.
No doubt.
House Speaker Jason White and people on the tax committees, Trey Lamar, who's on the Ways and Means Committee, are pretty dedicated to cutting taxes this year. And I think the House will pass a bill much quicker than the Senate. I think they'll send one to the Senate and they'll kind of negotiate there. But I know we've got a lot of, I'm not going to say infighting per se, but we have some differences in opinion on both sides on whether we should cut the income tax, whether we should cut the grocery tax, how we should go about that, whether we should increase sales taxes to cut income taxes. And I know you're going to break all that down. You're our finance guru here, but we will see a lot of action as early as next week, and I think we'll see some healthcare related bills. I think Medicaid expansion talks, while they may have those conversations, I think we'll kind of pivot away from that this year as lawmakers. I think Representative Sam Creekmore said it on your show that they're kind of in wait and see mode on what the incoming Trump administration is going to do on Medicaid policy. And why would Mississippi go ahead and rush a Medicaid bill together when they don't know what policy from CMS is going to be in the upcoming months? And we may not know that at all this session. It may be after our session.
I don't think we will. I don't think it'll be addressed.
But one thing that they will address, and I know Representative Creekmore is ready to introduce a bill, is reforming our certificate of need laws. And I know you've talked about that extensively. And for our listening audience, those who don't understand that, that's basically hospitals, medical entities, healthcare providers having to go to the government for certain services, right? Like if a hospital wants to build a new parking garage, it has to get a certificate of need, has to go through the certificate of need process, submit an application, and the government tells them whether or not they need that, how they can go about that. It's a very convoluted process, and lawmakers have argued that it's expensive, and pretty unnecessary in some regards. And so they're looking to lift that for outpatient dialysis centers, allowing hospitals to do certain things like repave their parking lots without government intervention. I know they're not going to try to get rid of con laws altogether, but they will try to tweak them. But I will say, Gerard, worth noting, since we've had con laws in Mississippi since, 1974, I believe?
Yeah. Go back to the 60s and 70s.
Well, 74 was when it was mandated at the federal level. That was repealed in 87 by the Reagan administration, but states got the opportunity to whether they wanted to opt in or out of it. Mississippi has kept its con laws intact.
35, I think, still have them.
35, 15 got away with it, but of those 35, a majority have scaled them back.
They have.
To an extent. Mississippi has not done a lot, except, honestly, we've just raised the capital expenditure, how much hospitals or medical entities can spend on certain goods. But they're looking to address that this year, try to find a way to ease the burden on hospitals like, for example, the dialysis centers that would give, hospitals like Greenwood LaFleur in the Delta or the Starkville-Tibaha County Hospital an opportunity to collect a new revenue stream, and it's not going to hurt any other dialysis providers. And so they're going to look at that. I know the House is gung-ho on that. Governor Tate Reeves, that's a big part of his agenda. He thinks that's part of solving our healthcare concerns in Mississippi is revising our con laws. And I don't know how that will go on the Senate side. I know last year a con bill went to the Senate and didn't get out of committee. But I know that Representative Creekmore and Senator Hobb Bryan, who's the Public Health Committee in the Senate, have had conversations going into this. So we might see some con reform, whereas in years past we haven't.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where we are in the session, though. We expect a tax bill as early as next week. Expect some healthcare reform. And then education. They're going to try to inch towards school choice. I know Jason White, the House Speaker, is a proponent of school choice for the most part, and they're going to try to find ways to allow kids to transfer from public school to public school with minimal interference. Right now in Mississippi, you have to have consent from both schools. So like here in central Mississippi, for example, I went to Ridgeland High School. If I wanted to transfer from Ridgeland High School to Madison Central, I'd have to have consent from both schools. Well, lawmakers are going to look to loosen that this year. Try to find a way. Maybe the school you're exiting from doesn't have to give its consent, but the receiving school still has to give its consent. We'll see how the Senate approaches that, though. I know that will likely pass in the House, but we'll see how the Senate, which has been kind of the holdup on some of these bills, will react.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be quite active at a minimum. I'm really shocked at the number of bills you're hearing might be coming down the pike. So
a lot.
Oh my gosh,
we had a lot last year. Last year was a busy session. Of course, we had two special sessions within the session last year for Amazon Web Services, which leads me to economic development in Mississippi has not stopped. If you blink, there's a new economic development project in Mississippi. The latest one being Compass Data Centers, and it's a $10 billion economic development project matching the one that AWS announced last year in Madison County, but this one will be headquartered in Meridian, and it'll be the first campus from this company, this Dallas-based company, in our region, which is really, really cool to have that. East Mississippi, that's a good pipeline. You connect to Louisiana and Alabama really quickly, and this will create thousands of jobs, good for economic momentum in Mississippi. But one thing, though, that is worth noting is this facility is going to be constructed over an 8-year period. So don't expect this overnight. This is a work in progress. But $10 billion economic development project matching the one we had last year. That's pretty good momentum for Mississippi.
Yeah, that's absolutely massive. It's just a great thing for the state of Mississippi, and I think it is positioning us well, perhaps as a technology hub.
Absolutely,
continue to attract these kinds of investments. All right, Caleb, we appreciate you coming on, man.
Thanks, Gerard.
Caleb Sailors, multimedia journalist, SuperTalk Mississippi News, has been our guest. We're stepping aside for a break. Right back with you.
Everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Don't you know that I'm loved?
Wow, hadn't heard that one in a while.
In a God of a vida, baby. Don't you
67, I'm guessing. Look it up for me.
68.
Dang.
All right, close enough.
All right, we're back in the Element Well studio. Caleb Sailors is going to hang around and tell us about a very interesting situation in Holly Springs, Mississippi.
Yeah, you couldn't quite get rid of me, Gerard. I'm back. Y'all, just for the record, I stayed here and I said, Gerard, I am not leaving. No, I'm kidding. It was amicable, but the situation in Holly Springs is pretty rough, and that's why I stayed on for an extra segment to talk about this, because this needs to be talked about. We had Public Service Commissioner Chris Brown on this morning with Dave Hughes in the early morning, so some people who may have listened to that interview are privy to what's going on, but these people in Holly Springs Utility District, which encompasses more than just the city of Holly Springs. This is 80% of the customers don't live in the city district. This encompasses a large chunk of North Mississippi, parts of Tennessee, and these people have been experiencing days-long power outages, random power outages, loss of power, just on a whimsical notice, even when the weather is perfectly fine, for years now. This is a multi-year concern, and public meetings have been scheduled. The Public Service Commission has tried to get to the bottom of this, and residents have long cried, like, hey, we're paying for our services, but my power's going out. Like one man complained that he was without power for around 90 hours for no reason. No rain, no tornadoes, no severe weather, no wind, nothing. But their substations are improperly managed. You got vegetation growing on power lines. And one thing I found, the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, was investigating the Holly Springs Utility Department's financials. Now, by the way, this department is managed by the city of Holly Springs. So the people that live outside of the Holly Springs city limits don't have any representation. They don't have any say in how their utilities are managed. Just keep that in mind. Well, the TVA went and investigated the financials and found that they were paying more for wholesale power. The Holly Springs Utility Department was paying more for wholesale power from TVA than they were collecting in bills. So they're operating at a loss. That pretty much keeps them from doing routine maintenance, from fixing power lines, and making updates to their substations, and it's a big problem. And Commissioner Chris Brown, who was once in the legislature, who was over the Utilities Committee, has been spearheading this investigation. The Public Service Commission called on an outside firm to come investigate, Silver Point Consulting, which is a private firm and not really looking to serve the interests of the commission, but looking to get answers as to operational failures within the Holly Springs Utility Department. But from what I was told, they've been railroaded every step of the way, not given access to city employees, even when records were subpoenaed. Those the quash motions were put together by Holly Springs officials, and they just were able to skirt just about everything. And so things kind of hit ahead this week. In November, the Public Service Commission scheduled a show cause hearing just to talk to Holly Springs officials, get with them, and figure out how we can move forward, right? Well, the hearing was supposed to take place Tuesday, which is day one of the session. And State Senator Bradford Blackman is the head attorney representing Holly Springs Utility Department. And so he went to the state Supreme Court, had a petition saying, hey, we can't show up to the show cause hearing because I have to be in session. I'm constitutionally obligated to gavel in with my counterparts, with my colleagues in the Senate. Well, the state Supreme Court denied that petition, but without prejudice, leaving the door open for the legal counsel for Holly Springs to go to another venue, and that they did. So they traveled on Tuesday morning. This show cause hearing was scheduled to be had at the Woolfolk Building, downtown Jackson, at 10 o'clock in the morning. Gerard, for giving geographical lesson to some people who may not know Jackson very well, the Woolfolk Building is right next to the state capitol.
Right.
Not interjecting my opinion, just telling y'all factually, right next to the state capitol. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions there. Well,
across the street, directly west of it.
Literally,
to be exact.
right next. It's 15 steps maybe?
Yeah.
So instead of going to the show cause hearing, these officials went to the Hinds County Circuit Court, which again is right by the Woolfolk Building, right by the state capitol, not far at all, just a couple blocks away. Well, got a temporary restraining order preventing the commission from having that show cause hearing. And so now Commissioner Brown, I talked to him on the phone. He told me that they're going to find a date after the session to hold this show cause hearing, and he didn't give me any more details, but they're going to find a way to hammer this down and get to the bottom of what's going on, why residents are losing their power, what the city has done, the mismanagement. And Gerard, this is eerily reminiscent to 2022 when things hit ahead in Jackson in the water system. The city was a little more transparent here in Jackson than they've been in Holly Springs, which Holly Springs hasn't given us anything. Apparently, they've turned over some documents to the Public Service Commission recently, but within a matter of days, Gerard, not like months or weeks or years ago when this was started to be investigated. Like, they're just now starting to acquiesce to some of these, not requests, but demands. And politics have been played over this. There have been accusations of malfeasance by the commission, and I won't get into the weeds of that, but saying that there's nefarious motives behind it. But all three commissioners jointly stated in Tuesday's meeting that their goal is to help the people of Holly Springs, the people in the Holly Springs Utility District that are ratepayers not getting adequate services. And that's what they're trying to do.
Well, that's what the PSC is for.
Right.
That's what they're supposed to be doing.
And I'll give Commissioner DeKeither Stamps, our Central District Commissioner, he and Holly Springs' mayor have worked with each other in the past, Sharon Gibson, the Holly Springs mayor, and he made it his mission to say, hey, you can't make these accusations about us when we're just trying to help you.
Yeah.
We're trying to help you. We're trying to help the people in this district get adequate services. That's all we're trying to do. We're not trying to play politics. We're not trying to play gotcha. We're just trying to help people. Gotcha. And so we'll see how this goes moving forward, but we'll look to see a show cause hearing date scheduled after the legislative session, but not far afterward, and for the ball to get rolling there. So, Gerard, real quick, what can happen here is if the Public Service Commission legislation was passed last year expanding their authority, what they can do is hold these hearings, and if they determine that the Holly Springs Utility Department is derelict in its duties, they can take this to court, and a judge can take them out. They won't have any jurisdiction over the utility department, and it'll go under receivership, kind of like Jackson now.
Well, they're a regulated utility. They have a monopoly. That's why they're regulated, and so that's the way the system's supposed to work.
Right. Yeah. And candidly, Gerard, I know this is not my show to give my opinion, but I would be shocked if Holly Springs Utility Department's not under a receivership when this is all said and done.
Gotcha. All right. Appreciate that
Thanks,
update.
Gerard.
We'll see what happens on that deal, man. Thanks a lot. Caleb Sailors. All right, folks, Ben from Madison had a comment I wanted to get to. I know Texas is going to take a hard look at it this year, talking about school choice. I'd like for Mississippi to maybe set up a study committee.
Actually, he was talking about something else we were talking about. He was asking
I see it now. Yeah, okay.
My opinion on ibogaine, which ibogaine is used as a hallucinogenic recreationally, but there are some who, similar to ayahuasca or psilocybin or even LSD, that have made claims it can help with, through therapeutic use, it can help with depression, it can help with addiction, and can even help control night terrors or PTSD.
Yep.
But because of the scheduling of controlled substances, pretty much all hallucinogens are considered Schedule 1, which means the government doesn't see any medicinal value and a high risk of addiction. And usually when a drug is Schedule 1, it is exceedingly difficult, if not impossible, to do any clinical studies on it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I would say, and he was responding to what I said. I said,
gotcha.
Basically, from what I understand, and I broke down what the uses for ibogaine can be. In my opinion, and I haven't had anybody make a cogent argument to change my mind. Why aren't we at least allowing for voluntary studies of therapeutic uses for anything?
Yeah.
If you can end night terrors and treat PTSD for American soldiers, for example, we just got out in recent memory of the longest war America's ever fought, the global war on terror. Thousands of military veterans live day to day with PTSD that they got protecting freedoms in the global war on terror.
Yeah.
Why would we let bureaucracy or anything else get in the way of trying to help these veterans.
Well, at a minimum, wouldn't the right to try legislation that passed under President Trump's first term apply here? Be something we could utilize here?
I don't know that it has the strength to really get into the scheduled drugs.
Okay. I got you. Man, oh man, yeah, I totally agree. If something's out there that could improve the quality of their lives, they seem to me to have a right to use those pharmaceuticals.
No, I'm not saying the government needs to MK Ultra and test LSD on unwitting subjects without their knowledge. No, that is far outside the bounds. But if you have somebody that is suffering from PTSD that says, "Yeah, I'll give it a shot,"
gotcha,
and it could help them, why not?
Yep. We're stepping aside for a break, coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Middays with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
Today on In a Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar, you'll hear an interview with longtime Alabama broadcaster Mick Gillespie. In a Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar is presented by Superior Catfish. Remember, there's catfish, then there is Superior Catfish. It's U.S. farm-raised catfish with homegrown flavor. Ask for it by name at your favorite store or restaurant. Go to superiorcatfish.com for more info. Also, don't forget to sign up for the SuperTalk newsletter, supertalk.fm/newsletter. That's where you go to sign up for that. Those guys cover all the stories across the Magnolia State, and they pack that all of that into a very convenient newsletter. You get it weekly, and it's something you especially want to be apprised of and subscribe to during the legislative session. So, apologize to Ben there. I kind of jumped to a conclusion because I know that he was talking about school choice when I started reading the text, because I know he's a big proponent of school choice. He shared some of his thoughts on that with us. But I see now you guys were having an exchange about the pharmaceutical you were talking about, the drug you were talking about. Yeah, you have experience with that.
Commonly, well, I don't have experience with it, but it's commonly found in Africa.
Knowledge of it. How about that? So, okay. Gotcha. But the school choice issue, something that we will continue to discuss on the program, because that is going to be a topic of discussion in the state of Mississippi. There's no doubt about that. Let's see. Bubba in Starkville says, we have a supermajority but can't pass universal school choice. Thanks, Delbert and your liberal friends. Makes me sick. Let's be fair. We can't get it through the House either. Not universal school choice. We attempted that. It could be different this year. It's hard to tell what the appetite is. I know we'll be talking to Representative Rob Robertson. He heads the Education Committee over there in the House. Senator Dennis DePauw, by the way, Rhino, who heads the Senate Education Committee, has not responded to requests to come on the program, like for a couple of years, and discuss this. Either program, by the way. And we sure would like to discuss this with him. I'm going to see if I can connect with him in the Capitol here and request that he come on and share his thoughts. I think that would be important. And, of course, I think we're going to have – I say I think because I don't know that it was nailed down yet, but we were informed by our content director earlier in the week that it looks like we've got the lieutenant governor set up to come on the program next week. And we're going to discuss this with him and where he stands on that. He has not indicated any support for universal school choice or even limited use of education savings accounts to offset the cost of attending private school. He's indicated an interest somewhat in public-to-public school transfer, something we discussed yesterday. But again, with lots of restrictions on that, Perhaps it would be restricted to only students that are attending schools in F districts, D and F districts. By the way, there are only 3 now, 2 Ds and 1 F, I believe. So that's extremely limited. Perhaps it would be limited, and we're going to get clarification on this, to students in F schools, because you could be attending an F school that is part of a district that is higher than D or F. Jackson Public Schools, I think, is an example. There's some F schools in the district, but the district overall is rated a C. So if it's restricted to the grade of the district, that would preclude lots of students that are in F schools from transferring if that school happens to be part of a district that is not an F district. And then there's the question of the what happens with the local component of the funding in an inter-district transfer, how that would work. I'm reading this morning, Rhino, about Tennessee. Tennessee has fairly robust school choice, but they're trying to expand that. Republicans have already indicated that's going to be a legislation they will pursue in 2025, and the governor as well, Bill Lee, he has indicated support for that. And essentially what they're going to do is limit it to 20,000 students, 20,000 vouchers, $7,000 each. And those could be used as that you apply for those. I don't know how they go about awarding them. I don't see any details on the selection process, but those funds could be used to any student statewide to attend private schools. But here's something they're doing, Rhino, that's interesting that I don't know that's been talked about in Mississippi. If an education savings account is granted and thus the state funding in Mississippi, $6,600, follows the student to a private school, in Tennessee, the state covers the loss of that revenue to the public school from which the student transferred. So you're basically paying double for a student, if you follow what I'm saying there, with an ESA. Fox News, SuperTalk News coming your way in another hour of middays. Stay with us.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. You are tuned in to Middays. We are live in the Element Wealth studio on this
Friday, y'all.
The NASDAQ is on track for its lowest close since November 27th. It's down 297 points at this moment. The Dow down 624. It was above 700 in the red, so it's come back a little bit. The old funny money is up today a bit. And once again, as we talked about at the top of the show, this is due to a very strong jobs report that came out this morning. And that worries investors because it typically indicates people are working and they have disposable income and they're spending it, and that drives inflation. So what we need is more supply to offset that. In other words, we need to grow and boost the economy, and let's hope that we're going to see some policies implemented that will facilitate that, will promote economic growth. Something you never heard over the last 4 years. Never about growing, as I like to call it, growing the old economic pie. It's always about recutting it. And old Robert Reich and the Democrats are going nuts over this, and you showed me the creepiest, cringiest video I've ever seen yesterday. And after you showed that to me, when I got home and I was just checking out various news sources, they're picking up on it too. Surely they're not going to buy ads with that thing or something, right? Are they just going to promote it on social
I'm sure
media?
It'll just be social media.
That was the worst thing I've ever seen. The thing that stuck out to me most of all is that, man, they sure are old. And I'm getting old too, I get it. But, man, they just look beyond their years, I guess, to some extent. And
Seems like every time we get a new Congress, we get a new record for the oldest Congress.
It's creepy. That video's creepy, for sure. But the bottom line is what they're telling you, we're going to fight Donald Trump. We're going to fight for you, and that means fighting Donald Trump. I want to talk about tax reform in the state. Before I do that, and I know I've really beaten this issue up a lot the last couple of days, the school choice, but I have the last couple of weeks just checked in, researched the school choice programs implemented in other states. And as I said, we're sort of being boxed in. Tennessee already has a fairly robust school choice program. This is kind of strange. They have a public to private program, but only for students in Nashville, Chattanooga, and Memphis. It's kind of weird. But they're seeking to expand that, and legislation that they have on the table right now, which I find really fascinating. I shouldn't say it's on the table right now. It's being discussed. Republican leaders, this is back in middle of November, have sort of released their plan, which is supported by Governor Bill Lee, to expand school choice. What they want are 20,000 vouchers. It's 20,000. We're going to limit it to that. I can't find any information as far as how they would award those. I don't know if it's first come, first serve, or if there's other criteria involved in, again, awarding those vouchers. $7,000 each, slightly more. That's their base student cost in Tennessee, slightly more than Mississippi's $6,600. But 20,000 vouchers, and this would be awarded statewide, not restricted to 3 communities, as we just shared. And they could use it to attend private schools. But this is what the state's going to do. This is fascinating. You hear a lot of objections, Rhino, to school choice that, well, if our student transfers out of their home school to a private school and the money follows the student, the public school loses that money. Oh, my gosh, the whole public school system's going to crash as a result of that. Well, Tennessee says, okay, we're going to cover that cost. The home school loses a student to a private school. Their state funding of $7,000 follows them to the private school. Thus, they lose that $7,000. The state of Tennessee, in this Republican-sponsored legislation, would reimburse the home school. They're prepared to appropriate $144 million in this year's state budget, specifically to fund the statewide school voucher program. How about that? That's interesting. So what it does, obviously, is it addresses that objection. Will we lose our funding? It's going to kill us. They no longer have that objection. The state says, no, if you lose this student, they apply, they get the ESA, they transfer to a private school, here's your $7,000.
I believe my point yesterday does a better job of refuting that talking point.
What's that?
The fact that they even argue that they're losing money is telling that they're not very efficient with the money given to them because that student is no longer there. They no longer have to spend that money on that student. So, again, we'll go back to using nice big round numbers. Say the state sends $1,000 to the school for the student. If the student leaves and that $1,000 goes with him, then wouldn't you think it's flush? Unless they're only spending about 10, 20, 50 bucks out of that $1,000 on that student's education, and the rest of it's going to the ether.
I hear you. And I'm going to be devil's advocate a bit here. Your point is valid. Well taken. I think you have to look at it from the perspective of a fixed cost, whether you have one student or 1,000 to operate a school. And then you've got the variable cost. So the question is, has anybody done any cost analysis to determine what are the fixed costs to operate almost regardless of the student population, the enrollment? And what are the variable costs? To your point, I would agree, however, in principle, that you have a lower variable cost because you don't have a student to accommodate. And it could be that enough students transfer so that you shut down a section of a class or something. I mean, you've seen that in college before. Well, I remember that when I was in college. Well, the class didn't make because we didn't have 3 people sign up, and it's cost prohibitive to operate the class. If you want to take that class, here's another section, which is like just another time slot essentially for the same class, right? So, but all that needs to be figured in. But here's the problem I think people would have in Mississippi is that, okay, we're going to implement school choice, but you're increasing government spending by $144 million to accomplish it. But the other thing I told Rhino about on the break, this is something else they stuck in the bill that I guess you could call either a poison pill or an antidote, one or the other, and that there's a one-time $2,000 bonus to every teacher in the state in that bill. So, legislators, if you want every teacher to get a $2,000 bonus, you got to swallow the old pill and vote for the 20,000 voucher program. And they also have some additional funding in that bill for school building construction and maintenance. So this is the way the sausage is made. We shouldn't be surprised at that. I'm just sharing with you what neighboring states are doing. Alabama, of course, passed sweeping school choice. Not quite as robust as what Arkansas did, which is complete total open universal school choice, full boat. That's done. The being phased in this year's the third of the 3 years wherein the legislation is being phased in. We'll see what happens here in the state of Mississippi. Thomas in Greenwood wants you to know anyone who opposes school choice is now racist, thanks to Madison Schools. Well, we went through that in detail yesterday. I find it objectionable. The one-page flyer produced by my home county school district. It's disappointing. I just put it out there, and I think again, it's sort of designed to kind of gin up opposition to school choice, but I find it misrepresenting what school choice is all about. That's the biggest problem. We'll see what happens when we get some legislation in the House, perhaps the Senate. Not sure. My understanding is that the Lieutenant Governor and the Senate are going to take the lead on, again, a very limited public-to-public option. And we hope to have the Lieutenant Governor on next week to get clarification on the details of that. On the other side of the break, I'm going to dig into some updates on the attempts to reform the tax environment in the state of Mississippi. A meeting was held yesterday. I've not talked to anybody. I'm just, other than kind of what I found out that occurred in that meeting, and it was Representative Trey Lamar presenting to the Mississippi Economic Council and the Mississippi Manufacturers Association, BIPEC, those 3 organizations are combining to just get their reaction and response to the framework that the House is likely to propose, and we'll share that, what I think it's going to look like, on the other side of the break.
Hey, this is Will.
We interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go.
This is huge news. Huge news.
You need to listen to this.
MidDays with Gerard. SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income growth and guarantees. Give us a text. Drop us a line there on the C Spire text line, 601-872-5800. 879-4395. Please do not text and drive, especially today. The roads are a bit treacherous. Well, on the C Spire text line, it's a good question. Help us understand why the market is killing us this month. This morning, the market is struggling again. Yeah, it's more than struggling. It has pared its losses a bit. It's only down 540 points at the Dow. Crude oil up again, as we discussed earlier. The NASDAQ, the S&P 500, also in the red. And it's still concerns about inflation. That's the bottom line, is concerns about inflation. And that translates to higher interest rates and concerns that the Fed is going to stay put with the current Fed funds rate. The market wants to see the Fed funds rate reduced. So does the president-elect. He wants to see interest rates come down, but doing so typically fuels the economy and drives inflation higher. Increasing the rates, that has a softening effect, weakens the economy, generally speaking, because the cost of stuff is more expensive, and that also has an impact on the bottom line of companies, and typically it results in reduction of jobs. The problem you run into is the stagflation. You hear that talked about by economists, and that just simply means job growth is strong and unemployment is low, but we have this inflation thing still fighting. We're fighting as well. So that's what's going on. And there's also just some concerns about tariffs, and that could be a problem. Our problem is kind of the opposite of stagflation. We've got inflation, and we've got relatively low unemployment, and we need to reverse that. And that's what the Fed is supposed to be doing by raising interest rates, but they stepped in, I think, too early and reduced interest rates. So
it's almost like they were pressured to do so they could help win an election that they didn't wind up winning.
Yeah. So that's, I don't know. I hate to think that that's what's going on, but it certainly could be. High inflation, stagnant economic growth, elevated unemployment are all the characteristics of stagflation. And by the way, that's depicted on the Phillips curve in the economic world. It's the Laffer curve, something that was created by Art Laffer, 82 or 3-year-old economist, lives in Nashville, served in the Reagan administration. To a great extent was the architect of the Reagan fiscal policy, and to some extent advising him on monetary policy. Not that the president has control over monetary policy. That is the purview of the Federal Reserve. So that's what's going on in the country right now, though. We've got still sticky, stubborn inflation, low unemployment. Those two usually go hand in hand. People are working, they're spending money. That drives the price of goods and services up. And what the Fed really wanted to happen was raise interest rates and see demand decrease as a result, typically because people get laid off. I mean, it's crazy, but that's their mission. That's their charge, if you will. Their mandate, they call it the dual mandate, is stable pricing. That's a fancy way of saying low to no inflation, and optimizing employment, which is a fancy way of saying not too high unemployment, not too low unemployment, optimum employment. And I would say they haven't achieved that goal at this point, with inflation still hanging around and investors concerned about that in the future. I want to see the Congress address these issues as a top priority, and I hope that includes extending the Trump tax cuts day one. Get on that. Include that in the big, beautiful bill. Let's get it going. So, on the C Spire text line, Hoseman is a Democrat. He needs to retire. He's not doing what's best for Mississippi. He's doing what's best for himself. I'm not sure it's himself as much. I just think he has very strong philosophical beliefs that I certainly don't necessarily align with 100%. I think he believes that his viewpoints, his policies are solid and would benefit the state of Mississippi. There's just some areas where I probably disagree with him. I think I know on school choice, on tax reform. I opposed the protectionist vehicle bill that passed a couple of years ago. He supported that, but so did the House, in fairness. I still think that was bad legislation. I'm not sure where he stands on repeal of the Certificate of Need laws, even if it means partial repeal. That's always been a tough one. That's a tough one in the House as well, just to be perfectly honest. The ballot initiative is something that I think it's fair to say he stands in stronger opposition to, or certainly wants higher thresholds with respect to signature harvesting and limitations on what could be accomplished through a citizen ballot initiative. I think there's some differences there. However, if you look at what happened with respect to Medicaid expansion last year, the bill that came out of the House was more liberal in that it would extend Medicaid coverage to more Mississippians than would the Senate version, simply because of the federal poverty level threshold. Over in the House, it was consistent with the Medicaid expansion standard of 138% of the federal poverty level, and in the Senate it was 100%. So you can see from that perspective that the House's version would have extended Medicaid benefits to more people than the Senate version. And, of course, more people equals more costs, both at the federal and state level. So, but with respect to taxes, I really think this is what we're going to see. And, again, I've not talked to anybody specifically about this other than just had some kind of off-the-record conversations with people, mainly in the House and at least one in the Senate as well, that do know what's going on. And this idea, well, you heard the Speaker of the House talk about it with Richard Cross, I think earlier in the week, right? Or was it last week? I'm losing track of the time here. It doesn't really matter. What he said was he wants
earlier this week.
I think it's earlier this week. You're right. His plan is to offer legislation that would phase out the income tax over a 10-year period, and I believe that would be without triggers, no strings attached kind of deal. No budgetary metrics or measurements would have to be achieved and accomplished in order to reduce the income tax to a rate of 0 over a 10-year period. He did show yesterday that Representative Trey Lamar, who heads the House Ways and Means Committee, so he's largely responsible for architecting tax reform, presented the ideas that they're thinking about to the Mississippi Economic Council. I think the Mississippi Manufacturers Association, BIPEC, part of that meeting as well, because those organizations are combining, as we had them on the show, the respective leaders of each of those entities, a month or so ago. But here's what I think we're going to see. It's phasing out of the income tax over 10 years. It's just going to happen incrementally over 10 years. But I think you're going to see the diversion of sales taxes, which currently goes to municipalities. I think you're going to see that end. So the full 7% of sales taxes we all pay today, state sales taxes, there's a component of that is diverted to 3 or 4 different other funds or entities, but the big piece of that by far is the 18.5% that goes to municipalities. That amounts to about $600 million a year. And by the state keeping that could be used as an offset to reducing the income tax. But then the other piece of that, of course, is that the municipalities would lose that $600 million of revenue that flows from sales taxes. And I'm talking about just grocery sales taxes. I'm talking about all sales taxes. That's currently about the amount that gets diverted to the municipalities. But I think you're going to see a proposal to layer on a a local option of 1.5%. What does this mean to you? It means sales taxes would go up to 8.5% on everything except groceries. I'll get to that after the break. 8.5% is a general sales tax, of which 1.5 percentage points of that stays with the municipality to make up for the loss of the diversion, if I'm making any sense. Coming right back with a half an hour of Middays. Stay with us.
Gerard Gibert. Going beyond the headlines, breaking down the stories that matter to Mississippi. Middays with Gerard on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Meanwhile, out there in California, they're still planning to hold their summit, right, to protect against the president-elect's policies. They're going to guard California against it while the place is on fire. It's one of them deals where you can't make it up. So you've seen lots of announcements the last 3-4 months where companies they're just disbanding their DEI departments, which they invested heavily in really since 2020. That was kind of the time when all this was set in motion right after the George Floyd incident. Every company in America had to go, look at me, I've got a DEI department, and really just turn their whole company's operations upside down, forcing every employee to attend all this goofy training and changing their hiring and promotion and compensation practices, their supplier practices, all the above. And we've reported to you a number of companies that have said, okay, enough, this really isn't working out. Many of them, when they were, I guess, just exposed as participating in a lot of this stuff and supporting a lot of that movement, the BLM movement, the Pride movement, the transgender movement and all that stuff, they got a lot of backlash. Bud Light, who could forget that one? Maybe the biggest of all. And then it was Tractor Supply and Harley Davidson and Walmart, on and on. And they're starting to dissolve those departments. You just told me about another one hot off the press.
Yeah, Zuckerberg has announced that Meta will end all of its DEI policies, including in hiring, effective immediately.
Say it ain't so, Zucky. Well, earlier this week, McDonald's made a big announcement, how they were ending all that.
They also announced they're coming out with their newest iteration of the value, whatever they're calling it now.
Yeah.
Because you had the value, or you had the dollar menu, and then the $1, $2, and $3 menu, and then the McValue or whatever. They got another iteration now.
Gotcha. Casey on the C Spire text line said that one of the areas where she disagreed with the lieutenant governor on is pornography in schools. I do remember this. There was a bill that I think would have restricted content in our schools. I have a friend, and it was unable to pass in the Senate. I do remember that. I have a friend, Rhino, that sent me a video where she attended a Madison County School Board meeting and read a passage from one of the books available in the library at Madison Central High School, I believe, and it's completely inappropriate. It's explicit sexual content that should not be available, to me, in a library. I can't see what the value that is in an education. I really can't, other than the left wanting to brainwash kids in some way. And you wonder about the people who support that. Is it that they have some sort of twisted support for this ideology as well? They're just perverse in nature, and they want to bring more people into their fold, especially when they're young and impressionable, to try to, I guess, cause some of these positions to be mainstream. That we should have like open conversation in a high school about sexual acts. Perverse sexual acts, by the way. Same-sex sexual acts. This is incredible. This has no place in a school setting. It provides zero value, so she went and read a passage from a book. And, this has happened across the country. But the FBI says these people are possible terrorists. We got to put them on the watch list. Not the people who, use a vehicle to run down innocent civilians enjoying themselves on New Year's. No. We don't need to be tracking those people or being on the lookout for them and paying attention to their manifesto, which usually involves death, inflicting death on what they don't like. No. We got to go after those mothers going to school board meetings pointing out inappropriate content in books on the shelf in the library. That's what I want to see ended in 10 days. That's my hope, my prayer, that we see that happen. Well, thanks for that, Casey. Back to tax reform in Mississippi. Just a quick review. In the income tax over 10 years, in the diversion to municipalities of the sales tax, meaning the state keeps all the sales tax. There are a couple of other entities that get a diversion. It amounts to about 10%. But the 18.5% that goes to municipalities accounts for about $600 to $650 million a year. So income taxes, about $2.2 billion. 2.2 billion. So you can see that if the state keeps $600 million by ending the diversion, well that offsets $600 million of the $2.2 billion that would be lost by ending the income tax over a period of time. So the other proposal I think you'll see, again, is the 1.5% local option layered on to existing 7% general sales tax rate, of which all would stay with the municipalities to offset loss of the diversion. So in other words, we're not going to divert sales taxes anymore to cities, but we're going to raise sales taxes to offset that, to counter that loss of diversion. It keeps the cities whole. You're paying more sales taxes, but the cities are whole. Now, that still places our overall sales tax burden below that of our neighboring states. I think the other component with respect to sales taxes would be a reduction in the grocery sales tax, probably to 3.5% or 4%. So, kind of a recap on sales taxes. The sales taxes you pay on general goods and services would go up by 1.5 percentage points to an 8.5% sales tax rate, but the sales taxes you pay on groceries would go down. But in exchange for that, your income taxes would be eliminated over 10 years. That's what I'm seeing as the plan. Another element, by the way, forgot about this with respect to sales taxes. I wouldn't be surprised to see a proposal to apply a general sales tax percentage to fuel. So you buy fuel right now, there's no sales tax. There is an excise tax that's per gallon, not based on the value of the purchase, the dollar amount of the transaction, which is what sales tax is based on. It's a percentage of that, the gross sale. This is just number of gallons. However many gallons you use when you fill up at your gas station, 18.5 cents per gallon you're paying in excise taxes. That goes to the Department of Transportation for roads and bridges. The 4% is what I'm thinking we're going to see sales tax applied to the purchase of fuel would also go to the Department of Transportation. So if the way it works, basically, if you bought $100 worth of gas, you're going to pay $4 more in the form of sales taxes that gets transferred to the Department of Transportation. Now, it's fair to say that that means that the checks that the legislature's been writing to the Department of Transportation to help them make ends meet the last few years, which doesn't get included as a spending expense because we're taking it out of surplus money and just transferring it to the Department of Transportation. So it's accounted for differently. We would end that. I think what it does mean, however, and by the way, we're doing that like with PERS last year. We sent them $100 million, just excess money we had to help improve the financial picture there. As we know, it's got a $25 billion unfunded liability. But it means perhaps that we start taking on more debt to accommodate and to fund some of those needs, as opposed to using surpluses, which we've been blessed with the last few years, to a great extent because of the COVID spending that the state received from the federal government that's, of course, going away. And then looking at the latest revenue reports from the Department of Revenue, we're coming in below, at the midway point, we're coming in about $80 million below the estimates. Still means we're going to produce a surplus, but it could be indicative of a trend that would need to be considered in any tax policy debate for sure. And I'm quite certain that our legislators are doing that. But those are kind of all the dynamics and all the inputs that are framing this discussion. Eliminate the income tax over a 10-year period, increasing sales tax, ending the diversion, putting that additional layer to the municipalities. Coming right back.
The new Gerard Gibert. He keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert, SuperTalk Mississippi.
I'm moving to the country, gonna eat a lot of peaches. I'm moving to the country, I'm gonna eat a lot of peaches. Peaches come from a can, they were put there by a man in a factory downtown. And if I had my little way, I'd eat peaches every day. Sun-soaking bulges in the shade. Moving to the country, I'm gonna eat.
Yeah, great question I got on my personal phone. Would state's tax on gas be calculated with the cost on the pump or calculated at the end when you're completed with pumping gas? Well, if it's a percentage sales tax, is what I think is going to be considered and proposed. Yeah, that would have to be added on to the gross sale of the transaction, just like any other transaction. You see the price of a good in the store and you bring it to the counter and they ring it up, and then sales tax is automatically added to it. So the total cost includes the price of the good plus sales tax as a percentage of the transaction. So I'm not sure how that gets implemented at the pump, with the essentially the computers that are installed in every pump. I don't know exactly the point of sale systems, but I'm sure that's doable. That's possible. So, yeah, when you see the price of gas on the signage, that presently includes the excise tax, because that's a per gallon price, just so the overall price per gallon includes that. In Mississippi, 18.4 cents. Adding a sales tax percentage, such as a 4% sales tax percentage, you would not be able to display that because that is based on the amount of the purchase. It's a percentage of the purchase, not a flat amount per gallon. That's what an excise tax is. Completely different deal, but that's a good question. So on the C-Spire text line, yep, Mississippi conservatives are against taxes until they are for them. Ultimately, property taxes will increase when income tax is eliminated. It's inevitable. I disagree. They're really, if you think about what income taxes are used for and what they fund in the general fund of the state, really has nothing to do with what property taxes are used for, other than the diversion that goes to municipalities, but municipalities' income is mainly from sales taxes. There's a handful that do get a part of property taxes for property in the city limits. And in some cases, the property taxes are less than the sales taxes. In most cases, that's the scenario. In some, it's equal or slightly more. But in general, cities rely on sales tax diversions to operate, to fund their operations. So this person says, give me a break. Well, what's wrong with what I'm saying? I would just ask, what's wrong with what's incorrect about what I'm saying here?
Nothing,
it's two different buckets.
He's saying it places a burden on retirees, which would make me presume they're retirees. So they've already got the sweetheart deal of no taxes on their income.
I got you.
But they're against giving anybody else that's still working a deal on their income.
Right, which likely includes, assuming that they may be parents, that would be their children, their grandchildren, their descendants, etc. Says Spin City. I mean, what do you want me to tell you? So you want higher taxes? The idea is to relieve the tax burden on people, and I'm for working with the legislature on how to structure that. You could get into philosophical arguments as to whether or not we ought to derive our taxes, our revenue, to operate the state and the cities in this case as well. What should that be produced from? Income or consumption? That's really what this boils down to. Now, I agree, we have property taxes. So does every other state in the nation. Ours are, didn't we look it up the other day? We're in the bottom third, I believe, of states with respect to our property tax burden. I know I've looked at states that don't have income tax, such as Tennessee, such as Florida, such as Texas. Those are the ones we think about most prevalently. They all have higher property taxes. In fact, I've got some friends, Rhino, that have actually looked at if they continue to stay in Mississippi, bought a house of the same value in Texas where there are no income taxes, their overall tax burden would increase because of the onerous property taxes. You know, folks, you've talked to people. Who hasn't that knows that? I've got contacts as well that talk about that, and you can look that up. Their property, that's how they've decided to produce income to operate. In Mississippi, most of ours comes from income taxes, sales taxes. The proposal here is to phase out the income tax, increase sales taxes to offset that, and in this case, a proposal of, okay, cities, we understand if we take this diversion away, which we're going to use to essentially pay for, offset the loss of income tax revenue, we're going to make you whole by increasing sales taxes, and that increase is going to produce revenue that you keep. Never goes to the state. It's 100% yours. It actually, Rhino, increases the amount because 1.5% is more than the current 18.5% of the 7%. Do the math on that. So I don't know. That's how that all works out. We're out of here today.
You're never going to convince retirees to give up their sweetheart deal so that everybody else who's actually benefiting the economy can have the same deal they live with.
Stay safe and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.